Is David? Okay, I'm going to call to order the City of St. Helena regular City Council meeting. This is Tuesday, March 10th, 2020. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Place your hand over your heart and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll move to the roll call.
Councilmember Shuto?
Here.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Present.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Here.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Here. And we will now move to public forum. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak on matters of municipal concern not on the agenda. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. Brief questions by council members for clarifications may be posed and answered, and council members may take requests that items be placed on future agendas, but in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. Is there any public comment at this point? Seeing none, I will close the public forum and bring it back to reports by staff and City Council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. I will begin with our City Attorney, and I will move to our City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple of updates. First, over the last couple of months, we've had a few requests about parking issues related to Hunts Grove and the streets in that area. And I wanted to let the council know that we've had an engineer take a look at some space on the property, and we're currently analyzing the possibility of a couple of updates. First, over the last couple of months, we've had a few requests about parking issues related to Hunts Grove and the streets in that area. And I wanted to let the council know that we've had an engineer take a look at some space on the property, and we're currently analyzing the possibility of updates. And that concludes my presentation. So we don't have a cost estimate yet. We are still analyzing requirements related to EV charging stations, and that would affect the number of potential parking spaces. But it does look like approximately 9 to 12 may fit on site, and we'll be bringing additional information in the future to the council. And then secondly, we're bringing up the city webpage because I want to provide the council and the community with an update on all issues related to the coronavirus. The city staff has been participating in cooperative briefings with our County Office of Emergency Services. So staff from the Public Works Department, the City Manager's Office, Fire and Police have been part of these conversations. We had another one this morning at 10 o'clock. The next briefing is scheduled for Thursday at 10 o'clock. And we receive updates from participating agencies and the county health officer. The city has also distributed guidance on its website and through its social media and email platforms to the community related to the virus, as well as to our staff. On Monday, yesterday, in partnership with the other agencies in the county, we put together a flyer that reads, "In light of current public health concerns, we encourage no contact greetings, no handshakes, just good conversation." So I've passed out a copy of that, and we've distributed that via email as well. And on our website, under the left column, the emergency preparedness link, we've created a one-click opportunity. This takes you to a number of emergency preparedness buttons that take you direct to resources. And on the far right there, the COVID-19 info, if you click on that button today, that will take you to a direct link to the county's website. And there's information provided on that website. And just to review a little bit of what's included in the situational update a little bit farther down on the page. Napa County today has 0 confirmed cases of COVID-19, and additional testing kits are gradually becoming available to Napa County. Right now, the risk of infection still appears to be low in Napa County, and the county is recommending that people begin taking some basic steps to be prepared. So that's stepping up our hygiene game. It's keeping a 30-day supply of essential medicines, getting a flu shot if we haven't already, and if possible, have extra essential household items around, and then additionally a support system in place for elderly family members. So we are going to continue to monitor the situation. We'll continue to participate in these partnership briefings with our county health officials. And this evening we are planning a release of a press release to our community that will just advise them of our continued efforts to monitor the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Presswich, and just want to, of course, remind our community that working together and working calmly and staying calmly focused through any situation is the approach that sees us through. So thank you, Mr. Presswich. And I'll move to our Finance Director.
Could I ask
Oh, yes.
a question? Mark, are we still planning to go ahead with the event at the library, or maybe I can ask Chris? Yeah, we have a census event coming up, I believe.
Greetings. The library has no plans to close or cancel any of our events. They're not the big crowds of 500 people or so we're keeping it on. As the situation changes, what we do may change, but right now we're open. We are not canceling any events. The census one is still 3 weeks away, so things could change. Just as the library staff, we're cleaning our desks a little bit more. We're washing our hands. We're doing all the precautions we're supposed to. So we've got hand sanitizer for us, for people who come through the library. If anybody wants to clean their computer keyboards before and after them, we've got the wipes to do those things. So, and we just got more yesterday. So
Thanks.
we've got a supply. I don't know if anyone else has any questions or concerns.
I don't have a question on the library event, but I wondered if we're still on the coronavirus topic, if I could, part of our desire as a public entity is to have people make public comments, et cetera. And if this gets worse, we may be in a position where people don't want to come to a meeting. And I wonder if there are some technical solutions, or we could simply have a call-in number for our citizens if they wanted to comment, and we could put it on the mic that way. If we get to a point where we can't actually have a public meeting because everyone wants to be virtual, there's certainly some technical solutions we could do where we're all 5 of us, 7 of us, 10 of us broadcast without us having to be in the same room. So I think I don't want to have any public voices excluded because people don't feel safe coming to a meeting. So I maybe in 2 weeks or something we should look at that.
We talked about that today at our executive staff meeting, and I know that the city attorney has already been thinking through some of those issues and may want to comment on that.
As of this time, there is no other alternative for the City Council to meet other than what's already provided for in the Brown Act, but there may be some technological solutions that we could think about employing for members of the public who may not either be well enough to attend or feel comfortable attending to potentially call in. So there are some things that we can think through as options for meetings going forward, at least for the public.
Thank you. Any other comments on So with that, upping the hygiene game and for our community to know that information is on the city website. We're in close communication with the county, and we would direct folks to the county website through our website. So that is where to find the most updated current information. Okay, and so with that, we will move on to our Finance Director and our City Clerk.
No update, Mayor.
And our assistant to the city manager.
Hello. Yes. Good evening, everyone. I'm here for Cindy, the city clerk. Just a very quick update that the city is currently seeking a volunteer to serve on the Active Transportation and Sustainability Committee. And then there's also an opening for to represent the city of St. Helena on the Napa County Active Transportation Advisory Committee, which is through the Napa Valley Transportation Authority. So the applications and all the instructions are available online. The deadline is on Friday, the 13th at 5 o'clock. And if you have any questions, you can contact the city clerk's office, and we're happy to answer them.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our planning director.
Yes, please save the date of April 7th at 6 o'clock for a joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the Council. It'll be a special meeting to discuss the zoning code update, the progress, feedback from the community, and the next steps. You'll be getting an informational email from Xenia and a meeting invite tomorrow.
Thank you. Our Director of Public Works.
Thank you. I just wanted to announce there's a special meeting for the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee meeting and the community of Spring Street from Valley View to city limits. We're talking about bicycle facility proposals for that section of road, not new business, but want to give the community an extra chance to discuss and see the options presented. And that is next Wednesday, March 18th at 5 p.m. located at the fire training room on Railroad. And notices were sent out yesterday via mail.
And that's at 5 p.m.?
Correct.
Thank you. Mr. Knutson?
Nothing, thanks.
Ms. Chateau?
I have something. Because I saw at the elementary school, the principal there has been teaching the kids this great dance to show them how to properly wash your hands. And I was inspired because I saw the statistics for how many people say they wash their hands after using the restroom and then how low it is that people actually do. So that compiled also with some information that I got about how people are saying, you know, this is just like getting a mild flu. And I was thinking about, yes, but it's really the older population that is vulnerable, as well as immune compromised people and kids, and also those of us that are healthy can pass it forward. So I wanted to encourage better hand washing. So I reached out to our county supervisor, Diane Dillon, and school board member, Lisa Pelosi. And then we got a high school student to help us. And we created this video that now we've shared at the elementary school and online.
Very good. Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And it's important and timely, so thank
Right.
you.
Yeah, there's specific motions.
Ms. Goberstein?
Nothing.
Mr. Doring?
No, thank you.
Okay, and I will just make one announcement. On Saturday, March 21st, the Napa County RCD, the Resource Conservation District, will be holding a Napa River cleanup in St. Helena at Sulphur Creek. And so that's Saturday, March 21st, 9 a.m. to 11:30, and it's meeting at the Valley View Street Bridge, 9 a.m. to 11:30, and bring a bucket, gloves, and a trash grabber if you have them, but the RCD has plenty to share as well. So this will be a community event and a river cleanup, once again, Saturday, March 21st, 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. with the Napa County RCD Resource Conservation District. And so with that, then, we will move to our presentations and public recognitions. This is item 6.1, Census 2020 presentation by Albert Lerma, Partnership Specialist, Los Angeles Regional Census Center, U.S. Census Bureau. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I think this is on. Can you hear me? Yep. Great. I'm going to pull up a PowerPoint here shortly. So thanks to the city manager's office and the city clerk's office. I know Cindy's on the road, I believe, today, for inviting us to do a brief update to the city council on the census, which is very timely because it's actually being released Thursday this week. Great.
Give me 1 second. I'm having some technical difficulties.
Yeah,
1 moment.
no worries. So my name is Al Lerma. I'm a partnership specialist with the U.S. Bureau of the Census. I'm actually working over in Sonoma County. So I've been reaching out to communities there, some in Napa, Lake, Mendocino County, to get the word out, get information out about the upcoming census. So we're excited. We've been doing a lot of work, and everything is going to hit the mailbox here this week, hopefully. Looks like we're getting ready to go there. Sure. Work like this. Okay, that's fine. I think you can all see it, so either to left or right. So great. Thanks again for inviting me. I'll give you a brief update and take any questions after that. So why do we do the census? It's actually in the Constitution, so it's a requirement. Every 10 years we count every person, not only here in Napa County, but across the United States. Why does it matter? Principally, really two reasons. One, we say power, and by power I mean power and representation. So the census data is used to guide the Congress in the President's office on reapportionment that happens every 10 years. So those numbers will be delivered, and states across the country will use it to guide them in terms of redistricting. So you want your fair share of representation here in St. Helena, Napa County. So you want to make sure you get a good count. It's also used by the states, and also district county supervisors use it for redistricting as well. So that process will be going on as well. I know we'll be in Sonoma County this upcoming year. And the second reason is money. And by money, I mean really funding. I left a handout there on all your desks. You might take a glance at it. But the census data is used to fund guide over $1 trillion in allocation of funding for various programs, some of which I'll touch on. What we're talking about, some of the foundational programs for children, Head Start, school lunch programs, things like transportation, libraries was mentioned, and a whole host of others. So you want to make sure as well that you get your fair share of federal funding for programs here in St. Helena and Napa County. There's been a lot of concern about privacy and confidentiality, particularly among the immigrant community. So the census data is confidential. It's encrypted. It's protected. We take an oath as census employees that we cannot share it with anybody, and we're subject to penalties if we do. So we're working through really a number of neighborhood organizations and community-based organizations, so they can be our trusted partners out there and really reassure the community that it is confidential and safe and will not be shared with any other organizations or agencies. The census data is important. As I mentioned, there's a whole host of programs that are funded and supported, if you will, based on census data. Everything from schools, fire, transportation, housing programs. Policymakers such as yourselves and on up the ladder at the state and federal level use it to guide policymaking to shape funding programs out there that impact communities not only here but across the country. Businesses use it. I used to work in economic development for the County of Sonoma before I retired here this past summer. Businesses use it to plan that next facility, the location where they're going to open that new coffee shop, et cetera. And so that census data is very important to our business community and helps guide them as they make business decisions. And for those of you that are familiar with the fires we've had in the recent years, it's also used to help with emergency planning and disaster preparedness. This is an exciting week. There's a series of dates there, if you can see them on your left there. I think probably the first one is March 12th that I said is coming up this week. So everyone that has a mailing address here in this county and across the country will receive on or around March 12th a notification in the mail to complete the census. So we're excited about it, and this is the first time you can actually complete it online, so I'll touch on that in just a minute. And there's a series of reminders. I say this is kind of like my kids when they were in high school about doing their homework and getting things done. There's, I think about, 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 reminders that we're actually sending out. So you'll get a series of reminders in the mail, everything from the initial invite to a postcard. At some point, we're going to send out the actual questionnaire if you haven't responded yet. So in communities that are predominantly Spanish speaking, they'll actually get it in English and Spanish. So those dates are fast approaching. I would encourage you all to push it out on your social media, let the community know that when they get that in the mail, they should respond accordingly. And these are just a snapshot of some of the documents that you'll get in the mail. There's the invite, there's a sample of the questionnaire, and these are the sorts of things people will be receiving shortly. This is kind of exciting. We really have a robust language assistance program this time around. Besides English, there's actually 12 other languages that you can complete the online census on. So that's exciting. So I think it's very robust. Folks should be comfortable, all the various communities we have in California, which is a very diverse state, to be able to complete the census either in English or in a language that's more familiar to them. And as I said, this is the first time you will be able to complete the census online on your laptop, via your phone, or the old-fashioned way, the paper survey. And so this is exciting. We're hoping this will really increase the response rate. So hopefully Thursday you all get something in the mailbox or shortly thereafter that'll give you that initial URL that you can click on and complete the census. And we refer to it as internet self-response. So it's, as I said, very robust. There's going to be multiple languages you can complete it in. We think it's very user-friendly. This is kind of the landing page that you'll see here. And I think because we don't have it live in the PowerPoint presentation, that cursor there would be clicking across the top just to show you across the top there are all the 12 languages besides English that you can complete the census in. So it's very easy. You just toggle across if you want to do it in Spanish, in Chinese, Vietnamese, etc. You just toggle to that language, click on it, and the census survey comes up in that language that you're most familiar with. The initial invite will actually provide you a 12-digit census ID code, which you can then use to, when you go to the URL, type in that ID code. And the census is really based not on names or persons, it's based on addresses. So we have a master address list, if you can believe that, for every address, not only here but across the country. So this 12-digit ID matches you to that address. And I'll just jump ahead a little bit. If for some reason there's going to be folks that don't receive this invite or have misplaced the invite, you can actually go into the census without the 12-digit ID and still enter your information based on your address code. So that is possible. And we also are really reaching across the community to touch all the various constituents, if you will, across there. As you know, there's a number of people experiencing homelessness. I know in Sonoma County, we've had a number of encampments here you probably read about in the paper recently. So we're really reaching out to those. So it doesn't matter if you live in a residence, but if you're in an encampment, if you're at a shelter, if you're frequenting a soup kitchen, we're going to reach out to you with teams to actually count you. So if you could read that screen there, it actually just gives you an opportunity to sort of put in a location. I live in Santa Rosa, and I'm at the Joe Rodota encampment, if you will. But it will allow us to capture those folks as well because, you know, programs for homelessness, people experiencing homelessness are actually funded based on census data. It's very easy, a short series of questions, primarily asking who lives there, who are you related, how are you related, names, ages, etc. We don't ask for things like social security numbers, bank information, financial information, none of that. It's really pretty straightforward information that folks share pretty routinely, actually. And of course, the traditional family that some of us grew up with no longer exists. So you may have an extended family living under one roof. You may have your kids, you may have grandkids, you may have relatives, you may be renting to somebody, you may have somebody staying in the granny unit. So we want to make sure we count everybody that's under that roof in that particular residence. And believe it or not, one of the most undercounted groups out there is children 1 to 5. For some reason, people think they don't have to count newborns and young infants, so they often skip those. And of course, we want to make sure we get a complete count there so we get funding for all those foundational programs for children. You get, of course, like everything else you work on these days online, you get one last chance to go back if you want to and edit your responses. If you thought, oops, I missed somebody. And go back and do that. And once you're done doing that, you hit the submit button. I apologize, these are a little hard to read, but and you get this sort of receipt, if you will, that says you've been counted. So we encourage you to print that out, keep it as a record of you having completed the census. And this is just a snapshot of the language support that we're providing. So besides the English and the 12 non-English speaking languages, you can complete the census online. There's actually 59 other language guides that are available to you that will assist you in a language that may not be one of those primary 12 that we mentioned. And so these are toll-free numbers here, and these go live in the next few days. So if you want to call up in a particular language to do the census or ask a question about the census, you can actually dial a 1-844 number, I think it is, and talk to somebody in your native language to get some assistance. These are just other materials that help support the language assistance programs. There's language guides and videos, actually, of some of those that people can access on our website, again, to provide that additional assistance. And these are just some of the dates and things coming down the pike, if you will. As I said, March 12th is an important date for us. The census should hit everybody's mailbox. We're doing service-based enumeration. That's something we use to basically count people experiencing homelessness. So we're going to be doing that at the end of this month here, March 30th, 31st, and April 1st. We're still doing some recruitment, so we're not quite done. Some offices around the area and the region are still staffing. A lot of them are already staffed up. We're doing something called Census in Schools. It's March 2nd to March 4th, but being California, we chose to do it differently, so we're doing it actually at the end of the month. So your Napa County school office here has probably, like Sonoma County, has gotten word out to all the schools to incorporate activities and other information about the census into the schools. So it's a way to get the young kids involved in the census process. There's the toll-free numbers. The lines are going, it says March 9th, which may be true. But for sure by March 12th, those lines, assistance lines, will be live and ready to go. We're doing something called Mobile Questionnaire Assistance, or MQAs. I'll touch on that a little bit more in just a second. I know the library mentioned an event here, and that could be something that we might show up if needed with people to provide census takers, enumerators there at such events in the community. And then we will also be doing something called non-response follow-up. So after you get all those notifications in the mail, if you still do not respond, Mr. Census will come knocking on your door to actually, do the count or take the census enumeration at your doorstep. So plenty of opportunities to complete it and get counted. So the mobile questionnaire assistance for things like we're really partnering with a lot of our neighborhood organizations, actually the library in Sonoma County as well, but with Catholic Charities and a whole host of other organizations to really assist us with getting the word out. And so that can happen in many ways. We can work through churches, we can work through CBOs, with the weather becoming as nice as it is. And we're not sure if with the virus out there, it might put a damper on some of these events, but we're certainly going to put our best foot forward to show up and be present at some of these community-based events where we can assist people with a mobile questionnaire assistance. We actually have people with iPads on site that can assist people in taking the census. So we've got a number of those we're scheduling already coming up in the weeks ahead, starting at the end of the month here. We have a lot of information available. If you go to www.2020census.gov/partners, there's a whole ton of information in there. We have social media posts, we have flyers, we have posters, things that you may want to share with the community, post in the various public locations, just to encourage people to complete the census. So we've got tons of that. Some are in various languages as well. So if you're looking for information, you can certainly contact myself as well. The city clerk has my name and number and information there. Oops. Let's see, I missed one. This is just our recruiting flyer. We were hiring. The basic requirements were you have to be 18 years of old, pass a background check, be a U.S. citizen. So we were really staffed up. It's a great job for a lot of the college kids over at Sonoma State and Santa Rosa Junior College and here as well. It's also a great job for retirees. We got a bunch of those folks working in the office. So we're still hiring a few people here in the weeks ahead, but we're getting near the end of that at the end of the month here. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions from anybody.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the council?
I have one. What are you doing this time differently to capture the infants, the babies?
Really working with our CBOs, like in Santa Rosa and around 4Cs, for example. We have Catholic Charities, CAP Sonoma that runs Head Start programs and things in Sonoma County, and I think similar ones here in Napa and the surrounding counties. So really educating the community through our community-based organizations. United Way of Wine Country has received funding through the state, and they in turn have granted that out to probably a dozen organizations in the surrounding counties.
And then they, as trusted partners, will let people know, families, that they need to fill out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and they're doing a whole host of things. I was really impressed. I've gone to some of these complete count committee meetings that are scattered around the different counties, and amazingly how these CBOs have stepped up to get the word out. And some of them are canvassing on their own. Over in Sonoma County, they came up with a game called Sensoteria La Luz Center. So it's actually based on a Mexican bingo game. So they're taking it around actually and sort of showcasing around the area. It's a fun game, and it educates you about the census at the same time. So we're using all our channels and partnerships with our community-based organizations.
One last question. Are you also sending out texts to remind people to do it? Can you do that?
I'm not aware. We're not sending out text directly, but some of our CBOs actually might be doing that. So.
Very good. Any other council questions? Mr. Knudsen?
So is the conclusion, excuse me, of the census actually July 31st, or is it can it continue? When is it done?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure that there's an actual drop dead date. We've been advised that I think we're going to probably finish up the mobile questionnaire assistance July 31st, so probably on or around that date. But I don't know an exact drop dead date, but I can find that out and get it back to the city clerk's office for you.
Thank you. Are there additional council questions? Seeing none, I'll say thank you very much for being here, and
Great, thanks so
we
much.
appreciate all the information.
Great. Complete your census. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. So now we will move to staff briefing, item 7.1, St. Helena Police Department Annual Report, and this is Chief Hartley.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, and city staff. It's my pleasure to present our 2019 annual report. You'll notice it's a little bit different than it has been in the past, and I think with this new format it'll answer questions much better than the older one, and it gets pretty much straight to the nuts and bolts. First off, this is a message from me. This is my message not only to the community but also to the officers that serve our community. As a department, we emphasize pride, excellence, equality, and loyalty. It is our goal to work with the citizens of St. Helena and other agencies in an effort to improve overall quality of life in our community. The St. Helena Police Department currently has 13 sworn peace officers, 5 dispatchers, 1 community service officer, and many volunteers that are each committed to providing the highest level of police, parking, animal control, and community services. We are guided by a community-oriented policing philosophy and stress the importance of working as leaders in our community and building relationships based on trust and transparency. I am extremely proud of the men and women that comprise the St. Helena Police Department, as they are a reflection of the community that they serve. Together in a partnership with the community, we will continue to make the city of St. Helena a beautiful and safe place to work, live, play, and do business. So, right to the nuts and bolts. There we go. Crime in St. Helena, that is the most commonly asked question that we hear. It did the same thing. Crime is categorized into 2 broad categories: person crimes and property crimes. Crimes such as robbery, rape, domestic violence, assaults, and murder are examples of person crimes. Thefts, burglaries, and vandalisms are common examples of property crimes. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department received 20,219 calls for service. A call for service is generated anytime a citizen calls into dispatch requesting services or when an officer initiates some form of proactive patrol. Common calls for service are traffic concerns, patrol requests, and reports of criminal activity. For 2019, the overall St. Helena crime rate is 66% lower than the California average and 69% lower than the national average. If you look at the graph on crime averages where we did the comparison between the state, federal, and ours, the formula is based on 100,000 residents. So you put the numbers that we have and it formulates it for you to do it. Department of Justice and the FBI, they do all their stats based off 100,000, which makes it a little bit difficult to figure those out. Crime comparisons. Property crime comparison between St. Helena, Calistoga, Healdsburg, and Clear Lake. I'm commonly asked of the local small agencies who has the highest crime rate. And this is an example of what it looks like. Violent crime, city by comparison. Again, we're in those areas, we're lower than the other three cities that in comparison. And naturally, Clear Lake, a very low economic area, which is shown in purple, which explains their high statistics. Person crimes. Crimes against persons are the highest priority as they have the largest impact on the victim. Assault with a deadly weapon. In 2019, St. Helena experienced one assault with a deadly weapon. Assault with the deadly weapons typically include the use of guns, knives, but can include other objects that can be used to inflict injury. If you look at 2019, it shows one incident, and in 2018, it shows two, for a total of three. Out of those three incidents of assault with a deadly weapon, two of those were on police officers. In 2018, Sergeant Tharp was assaulted with a tire iron over the head while trying to take somebody into custody. In April 2019, a mentally ill man was creating a scene in the Sunshine Foods parking lot. When officers arrived on scene, the man used his jacket, which contained a large rock. He struck one of the officers, Officer Ohm. The officer sustained minor injuries, and the subject was arrested without further incident. My point behind all this and the officers being involved in assaults with the deadly weapon, that seems to be the common theme across the country recently. Moving on to rape. The St. Helena Police Department takes the report of sexual assault seriously and devotes any investigative resources necessary. In 2019, one rape was reported. However, the victim was uncooperative and basically she didn't follow through with the case. The case was referred to the district attorney's office for follow-up. Other sex-related incidents. There are additional types of sex-related crimes. In 2019, there is one case of lewd and lascivious acts on a child under the age of 14. Indecent exposure case. In August of 2019, St. Helena Police received a call of a female juvenile who had been waved down by an adult male in a vehicle. When the female approached the vehicle, the male exposed himself. The male was later identified, interviewed, and arrested. Domestic violence. This is hopping all over the place. Domestic violence. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department responded to 14 reports of domestic violence. By nature, domestic violence incidents are extremely dangerous for everyone involved, the victim, the officers, and family members. And as you can see, between 2018, felony domestic violence, that's where there's serious bodily injury or death results in a felony, there was an increase. Armed robberies. In 2019, the city experienced no armed robberies. Residential property crimes. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department responded to 11 residential burglaries. Commercial. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department responded to 12 commercial burglaries. The difference between a burglary and a robbery is done by force or fear, and a burglary, as in a residential or a commercial, there's normally nobody there. Case in point, in June 2019, officers responded to the Pattis jewelry store for a burglary. The investigation revealed the suspects were technically proficient and part of an organized crime ring from South America. Diligent police work, along with the assistance from other agencies with similar burglaries, led to the capture and the arrest of these suspects. Petty thefts. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department responded to 37 petty theft cases. California law defines petty theft as anything valued under $950. That's a money base that has increased over the recent years, which allows crimes that were normally felonies to be reduced to misdemeanors. The 37 petty theft cases are anything from shoplifting to dining and ditching. Property crimes continued. Stolen vehicles. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department responded to 9 vehicle thefts. Many of the cases involved skeleton keys, which is what crooks often use, is shaved keys. The others were stock keys meaning the owner's keys that were left inside the vehicles. Vandalism. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department experienced a vandalism increase of 43%. This was due in part to a serial tagger. The department deployed surveillance cameras, extra patrols, and continues to actively investigate several leads. I'd go into detail, but because it's still under investigation, I don't want to give all our secrets away. Other crimes of note. Fraud and scams are crimes that have impacted many residents of St. Helena. The crimes have historically been on the rise as more and more credit card numbers are compromised, as well as theft of mail. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department handled 58 cases of potential or actual frauds or scams. One of these scams resulted in one of our residents received a phone call that she had won the lottery, and if she went and purchased, she ended up purchasing over $10,000 in gift cards to get her so-called winnings in return. She was one of the fortunate ones. We were able to track it down, and she did get her money returned, but that's very, very rare. Other crimes of note. Suspicious circumstances. This slide is not up there. Suspicious circumstances is a title that is assigned to reports that are important to record, but do not necessarily meet the definition of a specific crime. These reports are reviewed by department staff to look for any leaks or connections to other crimes. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department responded to 180 suspicious calls. Terrorist threats is a crime that involves individual threatening another individual, group, or facility. The crime occurs when individuals make a statement that is intended to be taken as a threat and suggests they will harm a person or group. In 2019, the St. Helena Police Department responded to 22 calls of terrorist threats. Traffic safety. This is one of our most common issues in town. Patrol officers work to reduce the number of traffic collisions involving other vehicles, pedestrians, and or bicyclists. Officers use the 3 E's of traffic safety: enforcement, education, and engineering. Officers will enforce various vehicle codes while on routine or directed patrol. During an officer's contact with a violator, they will either educate the driver on the rules of the road. At times, the department will work in conjunction with Caltrans and or the City of St. Helena Public Works Department to ensure city roadways are surveyed and up to par per current regulations. There's a chart of 2019 of collisions per month. In July of 2019, the St. Helena Police Department, in conjunction with the Napa Office of California Highway Patrol, executed a pedestrian safety enforcement operation. The goal of the operation was to bring more awareness to both motorists and pedestrians as it pertained to their responsibility. As a result of this effort, 23 citations were issued, 27 warnings were issued, and an untold number of citizens were educated on the importance of pedestrian safety. And this was conducted right at the crosswalk on Main by Elmhurst. Traffic safety continued. In May 2015, the St. Helena Police Department responded to a traffic collision fatality involving an intoxicated adult female bicyclist versus a large box truck in the 1100 block of Main Street. Since 2015, there have been no vehicle collision fatalities. Members of the St. Helena Police Department continue to demonstrate discretion during traffic enforcement stops. In 2019, officers effected 1,750 enforcement stops and issued 521 citations. Since 2015, officers have effected 38,000 enforcement stops and issued 3,179 citations. I hope that you found this report informative and have a better understanding of our crime within the city and how we compare nationally and locally. Our crime remains below both national and local levels, largely due to the cooperative relationship between the community and the police department. These types of statistics cannot be achieved without the help and support of each other. And again, a lot of what we do is proactive. However, our reactive stuff is normally what citizens call in. And without the citizens, again, we wouldn't be able to show you statistics like we're showing you today.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Chief.
you.
Are there any questions from the council?
Do you have, thank you for your presentation. It was very illuminative. Do you have access to clearance rates, disposition rates beyond, the arrests that we make? In other words, what happens to those arrests?
We can get those statistics from the DA's office. However, they're skewed. Just because you don't get a conviction doesn't mean that an offender didn't plead out or make some other kind of deal with the DA's office. So those, we can get those, but they can be misleading as well.
Okay. I would like to actually see those maybe the next time around next year, even though they are misleading. I think that it's actually helpful information for us to hold ourselves accountable to the extent we can. And I recognize they're not perfect because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of these things are beyond the local law enforcement's control. But it'd be interesting information to see trends over time in terms of what happens to an arrest. Because, we have to hold ourselves accountable to make sure that our arrests are proper, correct?
Correct. And I would agree with you, as long as you also had the statistics that showed how many cases were filed with the DA's office by our officers and how many were rejected.
All right, fair enough.
That would give you a bigger, better
Yes,
picture.
information in that regard would be more helpful for me. I think, so you have two purposes. You're basically telling the community, we have relatively low crime rates here. I think we can all acknowledge that. But as policymakers, we also have to make sure that our law enforcement is proficient and efficient in doing its job. So that would be my concern. I ask a lot of hard questions, not to harass or to
as long as you took both cases.
Right. The other thing I would like, this is an excellent report, and I would like to have more reports involving policies, because we're policymakers. Over time, maybe you can come back to us and things that I am concerned about, and not particularly in our department, but I feel like, to exercise our oversight on law enforcement, we, or at least I, would like to have just a summary, not now, but later, of some of the policies that apply to the law enforcement, and these would be things like how we deal with mental illness and the training there. The de-escalation training, that would be important for me to understand more about that. What our policy is on for lack of the chokehold policy, restraints in that regard, what we do, what we don't do, and how we train our law enforcement officers on that. That would be extremely important for me to know. Let's see.
I agree with you.
Yeah, body cameras, how we use those in the community. Where that information goes, how long it stays with us, those, when it turned off and on. Those are things that I think we as a council can exercise oversight, and hopefully it's good news and that you have all kinds of information for us. This is just something for me to know that these areas are being taken care of so that we feel comfortable in that regard. I'm sure they are, but I think as we go forward, it'd be great, maybe quarterly, just to get hey, this is what's going on. These are some of the policies that we have in place, Paul. our council. I know this is my issue, but it'd be very helpful.
Well, it's also helpful for the community, and I agree 100%. On our website, there is a search menu where you can access our policy, and it gives
Okay.
every single policy.
Okay, good. I didn't
we
know
have,
that. Okay, I
along
will
with
look
our
there. I
retention
appreciate that.
schedule for the body cams.
Okay, thank you so much for your service. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other council comments?
I
questions?
did. I had a question on the property crime, just because we're looking at the graph and we're seeing how St. Helena went from being the
I'm
least
glad
amount.
you asked
Yeah,
that.
so please tell me your thoughts. Why?
The property
Why
crimes
are we higher?
include our infamous tagger. We had a lot of tagging in the city this year, and it seems to have been committed by one or two people, which is still being investigated. But that's the reason.
Okay.
Every incident of a tagging, whether it was the same person or who did it or not, makes the statistic go up.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Knudsen?
Really interesting presentation. I have a bunch of sort of questions and comments, so I hope you don't mind.
I have time.
Yeah, fantastic. And also, I'd like to add my concurrence with what the Vice Mayor asked for, because I think those aspects of sort of our policing are extremely interesting and really germane to sort of what our approach is for our citizens and tourists. And I think I'd add to that as well. As we seek to sort of provide increasing safety to our residents and visitors, I think sort of this bicycle and pedestrian analysis would be very interesting to look at. Sort of, for example, that fatality 5 years ago was a bicycle car truck incident, and there was a fatality years ago at the corner of Fulton and Maine. And so it's funny how
both of those.
Yeah, exactly right. And so those things seem to be sort of a bigger problem for us than perhaps fatal car crashes. And so it'd be interesting to sort of, if you have any metrics around sort of pedestrian safety or bike safety, I think it's worth sort of thinking that through. The other thing is, I love the fact that you've compared us, you've benchmarked us against other cities from a property crime and a personal crime perspective. It'd be also interesting to see that from a traffic safety perspective. I mean, we have a lot of throughput, right, because of 29. It'd be lovely to see if Calistoga and Clear Lake and Healdsburg faces sort of similar
issues.
Yeah, because of that state highway, it sort of changes our approach. And then, for the wider community, for the paper, et cetera, I wonder if you have any hints on sort of the fraud scam avoidance aspect that might be publishable or spread out to the community. That seems to be something that is particularly aimed at, unfortunately, the elderly that may not be able to. There might be more of a trusting aspect, and you don't want to make everyone completely frightened, but is there a way to sort of be able to filter those things out in a way that would reduce our numbers there? And then I think also in the past with our sort of stolen vehicles, it seems very, very low. And part of when we first moved to town years ago, there was a rash of vehicle crimes that were about keys left in cars, but it seems like should be sort of over now. But yet some of that
reoccurs. It's every couple of years we get a rash of this or we get a rash of that, and you can never get enough reminders out there.
Yeah, and then so I do have a final is. Sort of burglary versus petty theft. If it's greater than $950, it's defined as a burglary. And I presume that many of our stores in town have very pricey items that, if someone were to, I unfortunately witnessed someone creating a diversion at a fancy store where then they ran out with like a ton of merchandise. And I want to make sure our business owners are sort of aware of sort of tactics as well.
Threshold.
Yeah, not just that threshold, but also the fact that they're just like those sophisticated burglars that came into town to rob the jewelry store, that there may be folks that are practiced in creating distractions in order to essentially run out with merchandise. And not that I'm expecting that, but it's just understanding the defensive posture, for our citizens and for our business owners, I think would be
And we do
helpful.
have a presentation that's prepared for businesses, and we've given that, like to the Culinary Institute and some of the local businesses in town when they ask for it.
Yeah.
Imagine, because we've had some turnover, there are business owners out there that don't know that we even provide that.
Sure. So I'm thinking sort of more from a prophylactic perspective rather than after the fact. You guys, I think, are fantastic after the fact, and I know that you're also out there willing to engage with folks, but maybe part of the presentation or in the future, et cetera, just thinking about how do we help educate our populace and our business owners as well of the risks and how to avoid them in the future. I hate to see people scammed by phone in particular because it seems so avoidable, and I hate to see vehicle thefts with keys left in cars because that also seems extremely avoidable to me. So I think part of that's education, right?
Thank you. It is.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you.
I just had one more question, a quick one. When I'm looking at the traffic stops versus citations,
Yes.
it looks like our number is still about the same number, but the amount of citations went down.
Correct. A good reason for that is we lost 2 officers this year, and we have replaced them. However, they're both still in training, so they're not out there every day working traffic as hard. So hopefully that answers your question.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion?
I just want to give you a minute to talk about coffee with a cop that happens now and then in town.
Yes.
And how is that going? And what should people feel like they can come and talk to you about? Anything, everything?
They feel, it's funny that we're having this conversation because one of my sergeants asked me today, he goes, why don't you let me go do your coffee with the cop tomorrow? And it's like, well, you're kind of missing the point. The people that come and see me want to speak to the chief, in a non-confrontational way or not behind a desk. And it helps me also so that they can see I'm a real person, not just a police officer. Traffic is a big concern, and that seems to be most of what people want to talk to me about. Others come up just to thank us for having such a great place to come visit where they can walk downtown after dark and feel safe about doing so. It's a myriad of questions that come up in comments. I've had tourists, there's cops from outside jurisdictions that'll show up for coffee, not realize I'm there, and they're plain clothes, and they come up and want to know if we have job openings. I mean, just all kinds of stuff. If I were to put my finger on one thing, it would be traffic. It is the biggest concern.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, questions? Chief, thank you very, very much, and thanks. I want to also thank the entire department for focus on keeping us safe and an orderly community, and also your work in any emergencies is so critical. So we want to thank you deeply for your work.
Well, thank you, and you'll see me again shortly.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So now we will move on to item 7.2. This is our Upper York Creek Dam project update by Ms. Smithies, our Public Works Director.
Thank you. A few updates this week. We received 70% plans on Friday for the project. There's part of the response to those plans were for the working the permit comments from the regulatory agencies, and those are planned to be submitted this week back to the agencies. We met with the geotechnical and grading consultant on Spring Mountain Vineyards property for the grading disposal site. In addition, there's ongoing coordination with Upper Valley and Spring Mountain Vineyards for taking sediment disposal, and hoping to have project out to bid in April.
Any questions from the council? Okay, we'll move on to item 7.3. This is the update on wastewater treatment plant upgrade, also by Ms. Smithies.
Thank you. We continued conversations last week with the USDA Loan Application Agency. Director Mitz and our consultant Hydroscience was on the phone about the loans and the application process. We also met with one of the package plant representatives at the plant last week. We have an amendment for the design consultant scheduled for the March 24th council meeting. That's where they do the full design. So we'll do a design bid build. which was different from the design build approach based on USDA's feedback. And then we're working on the SECA RFP, which we hope to have out for solicitation in a couple of weeks.
Okay. Any questions from the council? So we'll move on now to the 2020 City of St. Helena Water Storage Projections update, also by Ms. Smithies.
Thank you. As requested at City Council, the last meeting, we requested to have me come back and discuss the water projections, our current capacity at the plant, or citywide, excuse me. In your staff report, you'll see that our total water supply as of last week, or as of Monday, was 1,954 acre feet. If we were to increase, because of the lack of rain and rainfall in February, we're only about 15 inches, which is below our average at this point. And if we don't receive any more rain towards the end of this rain season up to April 15th, we will be at a shortage. So we're continuing to monitor whether we need to do water restrictions in the next month or two, depending on the rainfall. We do have a projection of rainfall in the next 10 days, which is good news. I also want to share that at this time, 2 years ago, we were in a similar state. We only had 12 inches of rain at this point in time. And we started to get rains in the end of March and April that put us over, and we were fine. But I think it's a continued monitor situation right now. The state's not really talking drought yet. In January of 18, we were talking drought. They were working with our operator staff directly and asking us to ramp up our modeling and our well usage. They haven't done that yet, but we're already proactively working on that and talking to them about if we increase the well production to 30%, and request an additional 200 acre feet from the city of Napa per our contract. And also the fact that we've had 2 really good rainfall seasons, or the last 3. We're in a positive fiscal year with our 5-year rolling usage. So we're not in a deficit already in this year, but if we don't get the rain projection through June 30th, and we don't get any rains initially in November, we could potentially be in a phase 3 by next November. But at this point in time, if there's a draft resolution attached to the staff briefing, that if we wanted to move forward and maybe the second meeting in April, if we don't get much rainfall the next month, then maybe we go to initial phase 1 restriction and then look at probably the second meeting in June for potential for phase 2 phase restriction.
So looking over the next month to see where we get. A question I had, it's April 15th is the date by which we after that date, if the rain falls, we do the release for the stream flow?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any questions from council? Thoughts?
So after April 15th, we cannot divert water into our dam, correct?
Correct.
So I'm curious why in the staff report you're referring to rain, monitoring rain after April 15th, when we can't really rely on any rain after April 15th, correct? It's not going to do anything to fill the capacity of our Bell Canyon Reservoir.
So we don't continue to bypass, but we still get precipitation. It's that watershed, so we still get water in the reservoir at that point in time.
What is the percentage of fullness at this point? I didn't look at the last.
As of yesterday,
report.
it was 68.8, I believe.
Okay, how does that compare to years prior at this time?
2018, we're at 56%.
56? Okay. Do you recall the year before that?
We were at 100%. That was 2017.
All right. I noticed the water year is the fiscal year. I get that. But are we not, we're projecting the amount of water we are going to have at least to November 1st, correct? When
Correct.
we're doing that?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to be sure because some of the language in here made it look like we're only projecting to June 30th, which would not be sufficient. We really have to look out. As a matter of fact, I think our ordinance requires us, before we do a phase 1, to look at these various factors, and one of them would be projected rainfall as far out as November 1st, and we're doing that?
Yes, sir. And I'm going to continue to get monthly projections from the acting chief plant operator.
Talk a little bit about the surcharge, because you may have mentioned that in your report, but I don't know. I think you did, but for the community's benefit, what does that mean to the community? Just to give some scenarios as to how that will affect our community financially in other ways.
I'll have to get to that point.
Okay.
Well, that's in the resolution.
The resolution was removed during the review of the staff report.
I'm trying to look through in the code section, then maybe potentially.
And maybe the finance director or somebody else could speak to that issue. There's an increased charge, correct, if we go into phase one? The water rates, yes.
6%, is that what I?
I'm trying to locate that in the report.
I'm seeing it in fiscal impact on the discussion.
Drought rates are 6% higher than non-drought rates.
And that's based on the fact that we're selling less water, and so the rates need to go up to provide the income to manage the system.
Correct.
But it's also it's also a encouragement for less use. I mean, it's both, right? It's to replace revenue, but also to encourage folks to conserve water.
Correct.
Yeah.
In phase one, restrictions are mostly voluntary, and then phase two goes into the more restricted.
I think it's an interesting concept because it doesn't really kick in until you have a problem, and we're sitting here now wondering about water and the water supply, and should the message be going out to people now, conserve, don't use more than you need to. But we're in this cycle in the water rates where if you conserve, we don't have the bump that replaces the revenue. And I think we maybe put that on the list next time we do water rates, because it's a little bit counterintuitive to me.
It also impacts sewer rates.
Yeah.
Or sewer revenues.
Yeah.
And I think your thought of being proactive and looking ahead makes a lot of sense.
I also, there's been some questions in the past about the city has, during water emergencies, has actually ceased watering of certain vegetation in certain parts of the parks. And I see, if I'm understanding the code or the directive more clearly, it looks like it's simply limiting between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. So it seems like it would allow for us to time shift, if need be, certain watering activities to make sure that we still have healthy plants. And I just want to plant that bug in your ear.
We had before the new rate adoption, we had a different code, and it was a more localized code. We went to the state version, which changed a lot of that. So we're aware as far as watering our parks and open space.
Have we seen any loss of capacity in the reservoir due to sedimentation over, I believe what we said, 2011 was when the Safe Yield Committee created their report methodology. Has there been any indication of sedimentation lowering the capacity of the reservoir?
We haven't done a follow-up study. That is in plan in the future.
Okay. Any other, Mr. Dorian?
I think this should be a regular item on our agenda. I don't know if we want to wait till April, even if it's a 2-minute report to add to the other two that we have. I think it's critically important for us to just get the information every 2 weeks.
Keeps it on our radar.
It's actually in our code that if it falls below our 50% median, that I'm to report to you at least once a month.
Okay.
So
thank you.
Yeah, it would
welcome.
be great just to have an update. Thank you. Any other questions on this before we move on? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on now to our consent items. Now, on the consent items, members of the council or the public may ask that any items be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action, for extended discussion, or for public comment, Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. I'll read the numbers of the consent items as we go, and I'll look out if anybody wants to pull one. So I'll start with 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and that is our consent calendar. Seeing no indication of pulling, I would entertain a motion to pass the consent calendar.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
And a roll call, please.
Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
And Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Very good. So we'll move now forward, and there's a thought to move item 11.1, the Voorhees Circle item, up forward. We have a guest who I believe is here for both that item and the CDBG grant, and so if that's acceptable to the council. Okay, so we will move now to item 11.1, and this is consideration regarding notice of intent to sell affordable housing unit at 1645 Voorhees Circle, and direction as to whether the city desires to exercise its option to purchase said property. And this is Mandy Kellogg.
Actually, Mandy and I have been coordinating on this, and I will deliver the report.
Very good.
And
I lost track. I didn't even know where that voice was coming from.
we have many voices in the room, and also I would also like to note, as if there are questions on the item, Andrea Clark from the Housing Authority is here, and she's also here to help with the CBDG item. We've been coordinating with them a lot the last couple of weeks on these projects. So, and the thanks goes to Mandy for preparing the report. She put all the details together, and I'm going to deliver it. So just a really quick summary on what the proposal involves. In February of this year, the city received a notice from the Housing Authority of Napa that the homeowner would intend to sell the house. It's a 2-bedroom owner-occupied affordable housing unit in the Wallace subdivision. As an owner-occupied affordable unit, the property was sold to the current owner, subject to a resale restriction and option to purchase. The agreement provides that the owner no longer wishes to occupy or own the home. The home must be sold to an income-qualified buyer at a price set by the agreement at either fair market value or restricted sales price, whichever is lower, with intent to keep the home as an affordable housing unit. Alternatively, the agreement provides that the city has the opportunity to exercise and assign an option to purchase the property. Should the city wish to exercise this option, the city would need to be prepared to purchase the home at a fair market value or restricted sales price of $354,146, or whichever is lower. As noted in the staff report, one factor to consider is timing regarding this transaction. The city's decision whether to exercise the option must be exercised within a 45-day period of the notice of intent to sell. Therefore, the option must be exercised by April 9th of this year. And further, once that option is exercised, the escrow on the sale of the home once the option is exercised, the escrow on the sale of the home is closed no later than 90 days after that notice of intent to sell, which is May 25th of this year. So the recommended action tonight is to direct staff regarding the option of what's the council's pleasure on the option to purchase. As I mentioned, we have Andrea Clark here from the Housing Authority if you have questions, and of course the owner. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any initial questions from council? Should Ms. Clark, are you able to come up and give us a little information if we so requested? Thank you. Any thoughts from council?
We just had a situation like this maybe 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, there was a ready, willing, able buyer, right, waiting for us to waive our right. Can you just elaborate a little bit on the marketing of this house and if there are potential buyers out there that you're aware of who qualify?
I'd be glad to address that a little bit. When I was informed that the the homeowner wanted to sell the property, I have kind of reached out to some of my contacts through the lending industry and just putting that information out there. There may be a below market rate unit available, and that the city desires to have somebody that currently lives or works in St. Helena. One lender came forward and said she might have somebody that works at Meadowood that might be interested. And then I actually had Jesse Duarte from the newspaper contact me. So we had a nice conversation today about that. So we've got a couple potentials. So generally the process would be then if the city does not exercise their option, then the homeowner would then be responsible for marketing the property, with us coordinating that effort. And sometimes we can make it as simple as, I've already got a couple of people that are interested, or it may have to be a full-fledged multiple listing and take interested applicants at that time. So we do vet the people that are interested to make sure that they're first-time home buyers and that they are income eligible. So a purchaser must, their income cannot exceed 120% of the median income for the county. So we do vet that before we even allow somebody to get into contract with the unit. So right now we've been doing a little behind the scenes until we know what the council's desire is this evening.
So are you saying if somebody comes forward, like through these lenders or whatever, you avoid the multiple listing and some of those costs?
It could potentially avoid some of those costs for the seller, yes. Mm-hmm. We cannot, I'm not a licensed agent, so I can't do any contract writing, but then the buyer and the seller would then make those arrangements and proceed with how they want to handle contracting and commissions and et cetera.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other council questions?
I just had a comment, because when I was reading it, it looked like from our agreement, we weren't guaranteed that it would be somebody that could go for the home that lives in St. Helena or works in St. Helena.
Currently, you are not under the agreement that you have. Yes.
But it sounds like it is a practice that you are helping us get to that.
Yes.
Okay.
That's always been the practice, to try to work within that desire, that preference policy. Mm-hmm. Yes. And then any future agreement, because the purchaser will then enter into a brand new agreement, and that the current resale restriction agreement that we use does have language in it that you have to go through the preference policy and do a lottery and et cetera.
Okay. And my other question was about the work proximity program in Napa County that helps first home buyers.
Yes.
Is that available for St. Helena families as well?
It could be, but I don't always, we had that question come up with the last sale. And the work proximity program is a equity share repayment program. And so it's not really to the purchaser's benefit, because the below market rate units are a limited equity program anyway. So if you have limited equity and then you have to share 10% of your limited equity, you potentially could have no equity left if that particular buyer or that homeowner wanted to sell the property. Okay. So I would not, that just doesn't make good business practice.
Okay, got it.
But it is available if they work within 15 miles, I think it is, of St. Helena. Yeah.
And then are you working with local banks that are helping?
Yes, the lenders that I've spoken to are local lenders here and they actually have their shops right in Napa County. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So to just clarify on the proximity program, because of the equity issues, having the proximity program working in conjunction with a deed restricted property, there's a financial aspect that doesn't make sense.
It really doesn't make sense, because the potential future resale price of the below market rate unit is based on how much the income increases during the time of ownership. And so, sometimes we see an increase, sometimes we don't. And so you could go 10 years and maybe only see a 10% increase. And so if you have to then take 10% of your, essentially, when you borrow then the proximity program, you're paying them a 10% equity share plus the loan that you've already borrowed. And so you could be paying all of your equity, the 10%,
Right.
to the NAPA and repay your loan, and the seller could end up with nothing.
Gotcha. And so I'm looking at the two dates that you put out, April 9th and May 25th. So there's a window by which you could work on this to see if there was an eligible buyer, and if that we're coming to the close of that window, then would it be at that point advantageous for the city to be more interested or be interested in exercising the option to jump aboard? I mean, does it seem appropriate to let you do what you do to see first, but making sure we don't go outside a window?
That personally would be my recommendation, is to go ahead and have the city waive its option and allow for the marketing process to take its normal course, kind of the work that we've done before. When we had a prior sale a couple of years ago, what had happened is they listed the property, and it was in the multiple listing service, and then the agent took and wrote in the listing that they were going to have an application period for, I think it was a 2-week period. So anybody that was interested in purchasing the property, they would the buyers would fill out their application and submit it to the housing authority, and we then would vet them to see if they're even eligible. Half of those fell out because they weren't income eligible. So then they had a pool of interested buyers, and at that point then it was who could already then be pre-approved, who had maybe some cash, or who could close quicker, and so then they kind of vetted it that way. And then we also had gently made the recommendation that they pick somebody that currently lives or works in St. Helena. So
what is the time or the date deadline that if it all works out and you find somebody, that's wonderful, but if not, what is the date deadline that we would need to be active as a city again?
April 9th.
So that's coming right up.
Yeah,
Okay.
you need to, yes, you would need to inform the seller what you are desire to do.
Okay, so by April 9th. Okay, so with that, if there are no other comments or questions from the council, I will open the public forum if there's any public comment.
Can I make one
yes,
more comment? We've never had a lack of interest.
I would assume,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So, opening the public comment, seeing none, I'll close the public comment. I'm seeing some public comment.
Mary Stevenson, our town, St. Helena. I just want to say that since this happened 2 or 3 years ago, we have initiated the USDA self-help program, and we've talked to probably 100 people, 100 different family units about that program. We have a waiting list for that. We already have at least 2 qualified people available for this house, so I don't think there'll be any problem in selling this house.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Clark, for. So I'm going to bring it back to the council, and I think I'll entertain a motion if there's no further discussion. I would just want to make sure that we keep an eye on the date in case something doesn't come together, so that we're ready to move it.
And it just says we need to provide direction.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I say we move forward and let them do their thing, find a good buyer.
I think that sounds very good.
Agreed.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for your work. Okay. We'll move forward and go back now to the item 9.1 in public hearings. This is discussion of potential activities and projects for inclusion in the 2020 Community Development Block Grant, CDBG applications, and consideration of approval of a resolution approving 1, applications for funding, and 2, the execution of a grant agreement and any amendments thereto from the 2019-2020 funding year of the CDBG program, And this is prepared by Mandy Kellogg, the finance manager. I don't know if that's going to be presented also by our
Director DeRosa. So I'll give I know we don't do CBDG grants a lot, so I'll just give a quick overview of the program, the 3 projects that we're going to be applying for, and then let you ask questions and open up for the public hearing, which is required by the grant. So just as background, the U.S. Department of Housing and Development, or the HUD, they have a community development block grant program, and it authorizes the use of funds to assist low and moderate income families in the aid and prevention of elimination of slums and blight. In order to be considered eligible, a suggested project activity must meet 1 or more of 3 national objectives that are listed in the CDBG federal statutes. Those 3 national objectives, are to benefit low and moderate income persons, prevent or elimination of slums and blight, or meeting an urgent community need which poses an immediate threat to the health and welfare of the community. We have been coordinating with our town, St. Helena, the Housing Authority, and internally with staff, city manager, Public Works, on what are various projects that the city could apply for, because there's a lot of money available competitively and also over the counter. So the 3 projects that staff is recommending that we move forward with our applications. The first is a multifamily single-family housing acquisition and rehabilitation. That project is sponsored through our town, St. Helena. We would work on the grant application collaboratively with them. Essentially what that project involves is the opportunity to acquire through a charitable sale an existing 4-unit rental property located at 723 Hunt Avenue. The building is well maintained. The current rents are below fair market value. The current owner of the property will require that the existing tenants, who all appear to be below the 80% area median income, or AMI, remain in the building after the completion of the sale. Our town, St. Helena, believes it would be a great use of the CBG funds because it would preserve a well-maintained. Thank you. Don't want that to happen. A well-maintained low-income housing site that is risk of conversion to higher rents when sold. The second project is a public improvement project, which I think you are familiar with, a Cronulla pump station. It's an upgrade to that. That project consists of removing the existing pump station structure and updating both the external structure as well as addressing internal operations and odor control. The project will update the structure, pumping systems, and include the construction of a filter system, which does aid in that elimination of the odor. This project was identified in the 2017 water and wastewater rate study and later added to the 2017-2018 5-year capital improvement program. The budget was allocated for the design to start in fiscal year 2018-2019. In order to be eligible to submit this project for a CBG fund, the city must complete an income survey that would determine if the service area is comprised of at least 51% of low to moderate income households. And the third project that we propose submitting an application for would be for a housing rehabilitation single-family residential program. The CBG funds can be used to continue the owner-occupied rehab program, which also meets the national objectives because it serves low income, which is at or below the 80% AMI, and also very low income, which is at or below the 50% AMI. Funds can be used to assist low-income homeowners whose primary residence is in need of repairs, improvements, or reconstruction necessary to meet federal, state, or local building codes and for the correction of health and safety deficiencies. So the recommended action tonight is to affirm the direction on activities and projects for inclusion in the 2020 state CBG block applications, approve a resolution which would approve the applications for funding and the execution of a grant agreement and any amendments thereto from the 2019-2020 funding year of the CBG program. Again, my thanks to Ms. Kellogg for helping coordinate this project, and our town, St. Helena, and the Housing Authority, Napa Clark. We have representatives from all organizations, agencies here, and staff to respond to any questions you have about the grant. Thank you.
Thank you. So So I'll bring it back to the council. I wanted to ask one question. Last year, we had the grant that was the CARE program. Is that this same grant? Was that just a name that we applied to that worked through Vineyard Valley?
That's our own program.
That's our own program. So
That's our program funded by the general fund.
Okay, so a separate program. Okay, very good. So with that, any questions from the council?
Well, I have a question and I guess a question for the council. When I saw this report, the first project that came to my mind, or one of them, is the parking lot at Hunts Grove. It would be a public facility that I think complies with the income requirements. There's also money available for pre-planning costs, and I would like us to look into adding that to the list. I'm not sure what the deadline is, but I think we still have some time. And it's been months since the residents there came and asked us to help them with their parking situation. I think it'd be an excellent use of the funds if we were able to get them.
I concur.
My second comment relates to primarily this category, I think it's called public service. And there's money there basically to help lower income people in a variety of situations, including seniors. And we're at this time of year when we are going to fund our local nonprofits. And this seems to me to be another source of funding that we might be able to tap into to support some of the programs that they offer, whether it's the Up Valley Centers or Rianda House. And some of them may even have some property acquisition in mind. And so if it doesn't upset the whole apple cart, I would like to make sure that they know about this and they could evaluate whether they have something they might like to include that we could add to the list.
Any other council thoughts, comments?
I have a question. I love the innovative thinking around the Cronulla pump station. This whole town much of this town is not low to moderate. I'm just curious, is that a comparative thought around the Cronulla pump station and the residents that are use that facility, which includes the Los Alcabos, which is a very nice hotel? Do we have a shot with the Cronulla pump station, or is this sort of a flyer?
This is a project that we'd like to investigate just because the return potential is so significant. So this is an over-the-counter, essentially a grant for potentially 100% funding. So what we have to do is a survey of residents in the neighborhood. And I think what we're looking at is just those that connect to the system. So we're at the moment refining the map for which specific properties would be included in that survey or would be necessary for that survey. So I'm not anticipating that we would need to add the hotel into the mix. But those are conversations that we're having with the granting agency to ensure that we do this correctly. So if hypothetically someone bought the house many years ago, they're retired, they have a fixed income. If there are at least 51% of those people in that zone, there's a opportunity for the city to fully fund this with the grant funds.
And also the dormitory, right? The CIA dormitories are on the Cronulla pump station, and presumably they're students. And I mean, you hate to game the system, honestly. It's sort of, but if the rules are the rules,
we do want to write the most competitive grant possible.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I just had one other question. In one section of this report, it refers to multifamily as 5 units or more. And have we confirmed that the acquisition of the 4-unit building is eligible? I support it, but I'm wondering why there's this reference to 5 units.
Yes, we've confirmed it.
Good. Okay, great.
Any other council thoughts?
I just wanted to echo I'm what Mary said. I'm supportive of some of the things that she's looking at. I too was thinking about the parking lot at Hunts Grove. And I would frame it a little differently. I think it's not necessarily their problem. It's our parking problem because it affects that entire community and our entire community. But I would like to hear back from the staff in terms of just the logistics and sort of the strategy in terms of how many applications are made and what the best way of going about it is. Do you try to do, I think you can do up to 6, I believe. I might be mistaken. Maybe I don't know where I got that number from, but whether you should do fewer or more or just all in and just throw the dice. I'm not real comfortable about where these will impact the success of other ones. That's the kind of thinking I would like to hear you talk about a little bit.
Okay, so I know that we can apply for additional grants, and I'm receiving a nod that it's up to 6, and so that's clear. And I think one of the questions that we still have regarding the Hunts Grove parking lot concept is whether or not it would be more of the over-the-counter variety or competitive grant. And so certainly we want to, if there's a project that's over-the-counter, my understanding, as long as we're within the grant caps, we are eligible to pursue those. And then from a strategic standpoint regarding competitive grants, I think what we'll do is assess our the challenge there and make a recommendation to you. And there is an opportunity to bring this back. The opportunity is to bring it back twice. It presents a very narrow turnaround time if we used 2 council meetings. So I would anticipate we would potentially be able to come back in 2 weeks and refine the writing. And what we also need from the Hunts Grove type of project would be a cost estimate. And I think we could put that together, particularly if it's an over-the-counter variety. And rather than study the options, my thinking is that we would want to pursue the actual project. So, for example, with Cornella, there is a opportunity to study that and use a planning grant approach to that particular project. I think, frankly, the return potential is so significant, and the fact that this is available now is something we have to do the survey and determine if there's an opportunity, and if it works out, it would be a tremendous relief to our wastewater fund and accelerate the project.
Thank you. I'm going to open it for public comment in just a moment, but I wanted to ask one question. First of all, I support both of Ms. Koberstein's thoughts on pushing forward. So bringing up the CARE program from last year, it was, to me, seemed very user-friendly, and people were able to get upgrades that they needed. Is this something that could be implemented in a similar way, that the upgrades for the community could be accessed fairly easily?
Are you referred to home repair?
Yeah.
That program? That's a little different name, but I think I understand which one you're talking about.
Yeah.
What you're referring to, Mayor, is similar to what we have here. And so this is essentially a continuation of that program. I believe that was a loan program last year. And there may be an opportunity to convert that to a grant program this year, which would be even more advantageous.
Okay, very good. So with that, I'm going to open it to public comment, if there is public comment at this point. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comment. I'll bring it back to the council. I'm seeing that we have affirmed direction on the activities and projects for inclusion in the 2020 State Community Development Block Grant CDBG applications. Any further thoughts? I think you have the information, the direction to move forward.
Yes, and we'll look at I think there was also a comment about the nonprofit grant program, so I think we'll take a look at the applications that were received and determine if there's any synergies between some of those applicants and the program that is available here.
That's great.
I think Mary may have, I think she did clearly suggest a little bit more outreach for those particular nonprofits. So when we bring it back, that I don't know what you had in mind in terms of outreach. We're on a timeline here in terms of does the staff have to do a little bit more outreach and ask them if they have any projects that are compatible with these different grants? That's a question to staff, I guess. And I'm sorry.
And I would hope you would inform them of some of the other categories. From time to time, some of them have mentioned the need or desire to purchase additional property, or, upgrade their office space or whatever. And I don't know if anybody can turn anything around this quickly, but I think it's worth the ask. And when we get in this cycle again, if we keep that in mind, it might be a way to help some of the nonprofits with some of the needs that we don't fund also through our annual awards.
So I think what we'll end up having to do is make telephone calls later this week to reach out and make contact with organizations that we think may be suitable candidates for this.
Thank you, Ms. Koberstein, for the observations. I think that's really, really great. So with that, you have the direct. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, good. Thank you.
This is a public hearing. I don't think it's been opened as a public hearing for
Oh,
comment.
I believe I did.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. Was there public comment? I'm happy to reopen public comment if you have. Yes, please.
Thank you. Erica Sklar with Our Town St. Helena. But also, I just wanted to point out a few things and reiterate what you said. This is a new CDBG year, and they've completely changed what they fund from like the last 20 years. 100% reversal. And so there's a certain amount of learning that's going on. And as you have seen, there's also a certain amount of discrepancy between the language in the documentation and what's actually eligible. So for instance, the projects that were proposed, there were more projects than these that the city had proposed and got on a conversation with the state, and the state quickly eliminated a bunch of them. And these were the leftover as to what could potentially be eligible. There's a big issue for St. Helena because our community is less, the low-income members of our community make up less than 50% of the community. So for a good part of what is eligible as projects for CDBG are actually not eligible to our community. For instance, on the Crenella pump station, we can get around that potentially if we can identify a section of the community that is directly benefited by the funds that are being put in. If we can show that that community is more than 50% below 80% AMI. But for a lot of things like funding, maybe potentially the nonprofits, I mean, we'd have to look specifically at each one that you all are thinking of. But specifically, because our community is not low income, majority low income, then a nonprofit that's serving the community doesn't qualify. But if we have a specific project, so that's why the rental, and we also even asked for Pope Street, and I still don't fully understand why, but it doesn't qualify. But the Hunt Street property does qualify because every member, every tenant is below income. And so because it's every single one, it does qualify. So there's just like some nuances. And then the second thing I wanted to say is there is a timing issue. And so this was part of our bigger discussion that we all had. And so I just wanted to share with you. So what they're saying is that there is, like, for one of the categories, there's $3.5 million, or no, there's $12 million available statewide for all communities like ours that don't get the money directly. So we're not competing against San Francisco, but we're competing against other non-San Francisco type communities. But $12 million statewide is not very much money. And so what they're going to do is they've opened the application. You can submit now. I think they opened it a week or two ago, and for over-the-counter. And then they're going to issue them to eligible projects until they run out of funds. And then once they run out of funds, then you're just out of luck. But theoretically, they're going to be presenting this again next year. So, for instance, if we spend some time looking at other eligible type projects, or what the city might, be able to, do more research on, then we could come back, or the city could come back next year for next year's allocation. But I think there's a little bit of a risk of losing this year's allocation if the city waits too long. And then even if we have an eligible project, if the state doesn't have the funding left. So that was one idea behind at least getting the process started, and then figuring out some grants that the city might want to move forward on. There's, and then having some money left to, if there's more things that come up, and then of course we can have future meetings, right?
Can we submit something now for the things that we do know, and then submit also in a few weeks for the things that we don't know yet?
Yeah, so one idea is to have, and part of the application process is a very structured public participation hearing. This is one, and then there's another one that will be required, but you can of course have more than those two. But it had to be published, it had to be translated into Spanish. All of the proof that it was done properly has to go in with the application. And then the resolution that has been drafted for you has all the language that the state requires. But yes, so if the resolution is passed and these projects can move forward with putting in their applications, then a future project could be approved as well. And I think that, I think that the total amount of funding that is being proposed is less than the $3.5 million that the city would be eligible for. So I believe that a council meeting could continue to bring up new projects. Each one, it's recommended that there's a city, call with the state to explain the project and make sure that it is eligible. Because, like I said, it's not exactly written correctly. But so there's a little bit of time needed to vet any new idea.
Okay.
But yes, I believe that we should, not let this money pass us by.
Okay, thank you. So I'll bring it back to the council, and or to ask staff, are we prepared to submit on the things that we already have here as timely as possible, and then add? Right, okay. So moving forward on the survey, that's the direction we're giving tonight, if we concur.
Well, I think the question becomes, you can set us in motion on the pump upgrade, and we can complete the survey at the earliest opportunity and determine eligibility. If it's eligible, we apply. If it's not eligible, we don't apply. And then if we added a clause to the resolution tonight related to the Hunts Grove parking lot expansion project, and identified a guesstimate number with the assistance of the Public Works Director, then we could add that tonight and then pursue additional concepts at a later meeting.
And then could we move forward on the housing rehabilitation and the multifamily single-family home acquisition?
Yes, those are teed up.
Those are teed up to go, then those can go now if we give the direction.
Right, but I think I'm receiving feedback from the council that the parking lot is a very interesting project, and to the extent we can improve our competitiveness, that this would also be a project to add to the reso tonight.
Okay.
But the question is, does that slow us down to add the Hunt project?
I think for us, it would simply be adding it to the resolution, and then our job is to submit the application, and we would identify an estimated cost. We should estimate tonight, if we can, round the number to the nearest 100,000, let's say.
I'm going to jump in just for a moment. I think Ms. Clark has some additional information. Thank you.
As far as the participation, citizens participation planning and the plan that the CDBG grant requires you to do, as far as trying to add a project to the resolution, I don't think that can be added because we did not include that in our public notice as one of the items that we were going to propose for funding. If you want to add the Hunts Grove parking lot, you would have to do another public notice and just bring it back to your next council meeting, but you'd have to go through the public participation plan and notice it and have another hearing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, so with that, I'll close the public comment, bring it back up. Ms. Koberstein, thought?
I just have to say I'm disappointed that this comes to the council without any opportunity for the council to have input into this list before we got to this point. I don't know who we are, who worked up this list, but I would hope that next time around it includes some council members. I'm fine with moving ahead with what we have, but personally I think the Hunts Grove project is very deserving and something we should pursue, and I hope we do that. And next time around, I hope we get a little more warning and we can all think of things and, weigh them as to what is most important for the community.
I'm certainly in favor of bringing back the Hunts Grove parking at the next meeting if we can, to move that forward as well. But I just want to make sure we don't lose the opportunity on these other things that are teed up. Any thoughts? Okay. I think we have the direction. Sir, City Manager, do you feel like you have?
Well, don't we have to approve the resolution that we have?
Okay.
Yes, and the notice for the program came out on January 21st. So, from a lessons learned, do it different next time standpoint, we would need to bring it to the next available meeting, receive some feedback, and then put together a notice. So this is a really quick turnaround just in the 6 weeks we have to get to this point. But I hear what the council is suggesting, and we will endeavor to put together some form of a conversation initially before the public notice goes out.
Okay. And then we're looking for a motion on the resolution. If I would invite that.
I'm a little confused why we would not just wait for 2 weeks and do the resolution at that point.
My understanding is that
that would incorporate the other items we've mentioned. It's required that we have to do a resolution tonight?
I'm going to ask Mandy to assist because she attended some of the training regarding the grant. And what I want to understand from a clarity standpoint is whether or not postponing this allows us to add the additional project in. There's a noticing requirement that. Did you get that?
Thank you. I've received some clarification. Mandy has been together with the working group on this project. So if you approve the resolution tonight, it will allow us to move forward with the three recommended grant programs through the CDBG. If it's not approved tonight, you don't have to approve it tonight, but if it's not approved tonight, you do risk losing some of the grant funding for the over-the-counter projects, which are first come, first serve as far as the funding goes.
And of the projects we're applying for, which are the over-the-counter?
Are all three
of the three?
All three are over-the-counter.
All three are over-the-counter. Okay.
No.
No, say.
No, I see heads shaking in the back.
Right. So.
The rehab program is not over the counter. That one has an application deadline of April 15th.
Okay, so the Crenella, which we don't know if it's eligible, is over the counter.
Yes.
And the acquisition on Hunt.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So how do we feel about moving forward with those two and then coming back with the others?
Can we move forward with all three? I would like to move forward with all three that's on here.
With all three, okay. Do we have consensus on that and then come back with the other? Mr. Doring, Ms. Koberstein, any?
I think they explained it fairly well.
Okay. So is there a motion?
I will move approval of the resolution without any amendments at this point, but.
I second.
I guess
And-
I would add to bring it back next week to maybe make some additions, just to clarify that.
You mean in 2 weeks?
Excuse me, 2 weeks, sorry.
Okay, and so we have a second, and so a roll call, please?
Do we need a second also on the 2-week comeback?
No.
Well, that's included in my motion. I assume that you seconded that, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Shuto?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the presentations on that and clarification. So we'll move now to item 10.1. This is our public safety power shutoffs and events after action report. And this is Chief Hartley.
Good evening again. This is basically, this after action report is based off the multiple PSPSs that we occurred last year and can expect more this year. To summarize what was identified in the after action report, after a disaster, it is best practice to utilize an after action report to document what works well and what opportunities exist for improvement. After both the 2017 fires and the 2019 multiple PSPS events, we created after action reports. The following 3 areas were identified between both reports as potential opportunities for improvement. The first is communication with the community. We addressed this with City Council, who recently granted approval to purchase 3 solar-powered signboards. These signboards can be utilized to direct community and local resources, direct traffic in and out of town, establish evacuation routes, and provide the ability to display brief community alerts. They are mobile and can be moved to various locations. Another opportunity that was noticed in the after actions were an alternate power source. The city recently received 2 grants to replace old and failing generators that were powering key city components in regards to water pumping, radio communications, and community resources. The new generators will have a positive impact on correcting these issues. One issue with the radio communications that has already been rectified is the old repeater at Meadowood has recently been relocated to the CDF building here in town. The problem with it being up at Meadowood, besides reception, was the fact that it ran off 2 old generators. The generators would run out of gas, we'd lose communications, we'd have to send somebody in a patrol vehicle up there with a can of gas to refill it. That, again, that's been rectified. The last one, opportunity for improvement, was a fuel station. The city has placed a new 250-gallon fuel tank into the new budget, which will provide fuel for public works emergency vehicles during power outages. In the past, city crews relied on local filling stations during an emergency. We learned during the PSPS events that past practice relying on local filling stations is not an option during a power outage. It's my belief that the city has taken positive measures acting on opportunities presented in the after action report, which will enhance the city's ability to provide emergency services during future events. Are there any questions on the after action report?
Are there any questions from council?
What about those power shutoffs on the outskirts of the city? When are you going to solve that?
I'm concentrating on inside that little border.
So on the relocation of the repeater tower, so it's not a new repeater tower, it's a relocation of the existing?
Correct. There was an existing tower at the CDF building that was used years ago. We had poor reception, probably 10 years ago, and the repeater was relocated to Meadowood, and it hung off the water tanks. The water tanks are deteriorating. The foliage around those antennas, has grown over the years, and our reception was poor. Not to mention there was zero redundancy. If we had a power outage, we had to find a generator, take it up there, and it was problematic. To solve the problem by bringing it back into the city at the existing CDF tower, we're allowed to reinstall the antennas for better reception, especially with Calistoga, and solve the problem of having to run up on the top of the hill to replace fuel.
And the repeater gives us extended range.
It does. There's still work to be done on it, but the first part of actually relocating it to the city limits has been completed.
Okay. Are there any questions, any thoughts, Mr. Knudsen, Ms. Chateau? Okay, very good. I will open it to public comment here. Seeing none, I will close the public comment. I will thank you very much and appreciate hearing about the upgrades, and we'll continue pushing forward on making sure that we're looking at all our systems. So thank you. Okay, with that, we will now move to item 10.2, and this is discussion and direction related to January 8, 2020 Nolan Tam Architects presentation on massing concepts and cost estimates for construction and renovation of various civic buildings and additional configuration. This was prepared by Priya Nixon, our assistant to the city manager, and we have Nolan Tam here to give a presentation. Thank you for being here.
And Mayor, I'll just do a quick introduction briefly. At this special meeting of January 8th, 2020, the council requested that Nolan Tam bring back the consolidated campus concept. This is a two-story structure of a joint city hall library concept to evaluate potential efficiencies with co-locating the library and city hall on the library lane parcel. So we're bringing back that information tonight along with some additional drawings for context along with cost estimates.
Thank you.
Janet Tam's here to present this.
Thanks, Mark. Mayor Ellsworth and City Council members, again, Nolan Tam team is very happy to be here. I'm Janet Tam, Trina Goodwin, and Tom Beeler have joined me. And as Mark said today, we wanted to show on the agenda, next, Zena. Tonight we want to review 3 additional master site plan options that we identified last time. We're calling them 5, 6, and 7. And I'll go through them in a minute, but what we want to do is show them what they look like physically on their site plans and then compare them in terms of space program and then cost estimates. Next one. Next one. So the first scheme, which is option 5, is really what we can consider the sort of the status quo option. It's the more minimalist scheme. It shows the library pretty much intact as it is. Its existing 12,000 square foot footprint, in addition, the 1,700 square foot Stevenson Museum are all intact. In this particular scheme, we're thinking that the improvement to this library plan would be pretty much cosmetic and just sort of interior faceless, no major work to it at all. And then what we've shown is the new City Hall building, which is a single story, which you've seen other options in the past where it was at the corner of Adamson, but it's now pushed over towards as close as we can to the library building, but with the appropriate setbacks. And the overall project area for both of these projects, both of these buildings, is about 22,900 square feet. If you'll notice that it does, of course, it does have to scoot beyond the property line of the library, so it does encroach still into the Adams property. And then the next image just shows you in 3 dimensions the existing library and the one-story City Hall building. And I'll go into more detail about the spaces in it shortly. But then the next option number 6, is similar. However, it takes away the freestanding City Hall and makes it a City Hall addition to the existing library building. It's what we're considering one of the 2 consolidated or combined schemes. I forgot to mention in the previous scheme, what was deleted was from our campus schemes previously shown was the multipurpose building. However, keep going, sorry. I'm sorry, back to this one, yeah. But in this particular scheme, we've put back a much smaller multi-purpose room, which is in the northeast corner. You can see that. I wish I had a pointer. It's the one with a big circle. And the library, in this case, we're tweaking it so that it actually is considered sort of a major renovation, both interior and exterior. And so the spaces, although the footprint size is pretty much the same as the existing, we've made it a little more efficient and reconfigured some of the spaces. And this option is 25,000 square feet, so it's bigger than the last one. You'll notice that there's no change to the parking area in this scheme either. The Stevenson Library has been removed so that there's room for a more generous entry plaza. And then a couple of images of the 3D. Here is the new City Hall addition that's attached to the library. And the next image is a little more of a on the eye level of what it might look like. Again, it could be sort of a vernacular sort of gabled shaped structure, although these are not really designs, but just to give you a sense of how big this might feel like and how it appears in the landscape. And then the next image is really more from a distance. I think this is taken from Adams Street, right, Tom? And you can see the St. Helena in the background. So the third and sort of final scheme that we looked at, in addition to the ones last time, is what we're calling option 7. This is a 2-story scheme. It is completely new. It removes the existing library because you can see it's gone. You can see a blue line on the east side of what is now a new surface parking lot that represents where the existing property line for the library is. So you'll notice that this option, 2-story option, is completely fits into the existing property lines of the existing library. It's about 2,000 square feet more than the last option. It's 27,000 square feet because it's a 2-story building. If you have a 2-story building, you have to allow more area for elevators and stairs, typically 2 stairs from the top so that they have exiting going down. So on the first level, as I mentioned before, the parking is surface parking, pretty much replaces the parking that was on the other side in the existing library site plan, and it puts the multi-purpose room as that little room that's skewed to the onto the eastern property line, and the City Hall portion of this building is to the north, and you can see it has the other big circle. It's the new City Hall, and there's a lobby. You can see where the triangle is. That's the entry that you enter the whole building, and the City Hall is on your right when you enter, and the children's library is on the left. Now, because it's a new building, we can make the footprint and the planning of this new building more rational, and so that we're integrating these uses of City Hall and library more completely, so that the shared spaces are more easily shared. For example, the children's library can use the multi-purpose room as the storytelling, or the public can come into the multi-purpose room and then spill out into this new outdoor space that's on the west property line. This particular site plan also takes advantage of the views that are going to the up towards the northwest that are so precious, and you'll see in the next image, the second floor, that there are decks that also you can come out onto and look out onto the view. So on the second level are the remaining library uses, and the museum, the Stevenson Library, is on top of the multi-purpose room. I think those of you, many in the community audience, and also Anna and those people who went to the Half Moon Bay also might recognize this sort of similar diagram where there's the little community room, and that's off of the main library, 2-story library. So I'll go into more detail about this shortly, but then the next image you'll see the 3D massing. It is, in our minds, allows us to be a little more sustainable than the previous schemes, in that we have a lot of pretty much south-facing photovoltaics or solar panels on the roof. It has a pretty ideal what you call width of building, so that there's possibility for cross ventilation and daylighting, which are all sort of basic concepts in sustainable design. The next image is again at ground level, where it is intended to be sort of a vernacular but contemporary building character. Again, it's not designed. I could also maybe we should nod to our Muni barn example that was shown last time. It's sort of trying to respect some of those concepts that came from that also. And then the last image, or the second to last image, again from a distance from Adam Street, looking to St. Helena. And then the next image is, if you can start to imagine what it might be like inside, where you're inside the building and looking out to the northwest. So those are the physical designs of those three options, and then I'd like to compare those options. Next slide. First, looking at the program. So option 4 represents sort of the synthesis of many of the things we were talking about before we looked at these three options. And this, just to review a few of the things, this is, again, the campus approach. It does have 3 freestanding buildings. It, I think in many of these schemes, we are thinking of an underground or semi-underground parking lot. It's 33,500 square feet, so it's in the more like the 33 to 35,000 square foot range. And the library is larger in this case than the existing library. Instead of, it's about 2,500 square feet larger. It includes a larger children's room, a larger teen space, and a couple of more smaller meeting rooms. The City Hall space includes the museum, and it has a little more room for meeting rooms and also a more generous lobby. Now, option 5, which is what we presented before, again, this is the more minimal scheme, and the program differences here are that the freestanding City Hall is smaller than option 4 in that it's more minimal because we don't need to have the museum in it. We've left the museum where it is. It has, again, in this case, of all the schemes we're showing, it has no additional large multi-purpose room that could double as a city council chambers. In the City Hall building, all of the departments are represented. The way we arrived at this 8,500 square feet is that it is pretty much this similar area to what houses the current staff, including Public Works, which is at a different location. So then if you go to the next slide, again, you can see option 5. I've left it there so we can compare it to option 6. Option 6, again, is pushed over and it's becoming part of the library. However, we've done away with the Stevenson Library and given it a new location at the bottom of the City Hall addition. The City Hall addition in this case is it's what we call the usable or assignable area. The actual office spaces is about 6,800 square feet, and it's smaller because we now are sharing restrooms, we're sharing the lobby, and there's no need for those as much circulation if it's not a freestanding building like in option 5. The multi-purpose room, which does occur in this space, is much smaller than in the campus scheme. It's overall, it's about, you can see at the bottom, it's about 2,700 square feet, but within that space, there's a multi-purpose room that could be a council chambers. It's much smaller. Instead of 3,000 square feet in our earlier campus schemes, it's more like 1,800 square feet, and it'll hold about 100 people at tables if you were to have a banquet or rent it out to the community. I should point out there's no loss of program space. Some of the spaces are, as I mentioned before, are reconfigured in this scheme for the library to make it just more efficient, but there's really no loss of programs. It doesn't have as large a space for the library as in the campus scheme, but there's no loss of use. The next image now compares, you'll see option 6, which we just talked about, and option 7, the 2-story scheme. I mentioned before, the two-story scheme is 2,000 square feet larger. The city hall is fairly similar in size, is maybe almost 6,500 square feet versus 6,800 square feet. It's still, in our minds, pretty similar. The multi-purpose room is similar in size. It's 1,800 square feet also at the first level, and has a kitchen you can see to the right of it in the first floor. If you look at the library portion, the areas here that I've written here are such that the city hall is pretty much the assignable space, but the areas I've written here for the library actually include the lobby, the elevator, the stairs, and the restrooms. So it's a little bit harder to, I didn't break it down, I apologize, but it represents more than just the library space in the areas that are shown here. I think I should add to that, Trina, in terms of area explanation.
I think the area is
Okay, all right, next slide. This one summarizes everything, but I just want to point out, again, the difference in areas. The campus schemes were closer to 33 to 35,000 square feet. Option 5 is the smallest because it has no multi-purpose room at almost 23,000 square feet, and then it grows to 2,000 square feet for each scheme. 6 is 25, and 7, because it's 2 stories, is 27. The shared spaces, item 5, just indicates the shared spaces, the synergy between the two. The saving of space occurs in the library. There are shared meeting rooms, shared restrooms. You don't have to have a set of restrooms per freestanding building. There's efficiency in the reduction of hallways and what we call circulation spaces and mechanical spaces. And the last section here is really about cost estimates. And the next image, again, is just a reminder of how we establish a budget. There are different components to our budget. The first is really construction cost, which is the building, the site work, and escalation. In the numbers I'm presenting next do not include escalation right now, given that we don't know when this is going to start. But once we do figure it out, escalation typically right now is running 5% per year, compounded annually. If we choose to have premiums for net zero energy, other sustainable features, that usually is a premium of 10%, and in the numbers I'm about to show you, that it would be an extra. The other component of project cost are soft costs, and we went over this before. It's an allowance right now of about 30% of the project cost, not of construction cost, but of project cost. That can vary from as low as 25% if there are very, very few soft costs, to it could be as high as 45 to 50%, depending on which community you're in, or what other expenses you might have. Like you might have purchase of the property in something like this, but in this case you don't. But typically it includes what we call FF&E, all the furniture. It includes design fees, includes construction management fees, any of your particular expenses, including utility fees, inspections, and of course an important allowance for construction contingency, which we recommend being a minimum of 10%. So given that, the next image is really summarizing the different project costs for these 3 schemes which I've just presented, and comparing it to the earlier campus schemes, which are represented by option 4. So I think what I'll do, just in the interest of time, is just go straight to the total project cost, which does include the buildings, the site, and 30% soft cost for these different components. So option 4, which was one of the more expensive of the 4 options that we presented last time, is approximately $54 million, and the for that project, for the campus scheme. Option 5, which is the minimalist scheme, and it really assumes no major change to the library. It's just a facelift at really about $300 a square foot, is about $17.8 million in project cost. Option 6 and 7, the 2 consolidated schemes. Option 6 is, again, the library with the City Hall addition, and that adds up to about $33 million. And then option 7, which is about $4 million higher than the option 6 is $38.7 million, which is about up to $15 million less than the more expensive campus schemes. So in consolidating the program, you can see there in creating one building instead of multiple buildings, you are saving a significant amount of construction cost. So again, these numbers do not include escalation or the parking garages or any kind of special sustainability high-level net zero or LEED platinum features. So that's where we are right now. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Are there any initial comments or questions from council? Okay, Mr. Knudsen, are you leaning up? So I'm going to open it for public comment.
Hello, I'm Lynn Weber, and I'm the chair of the Board of Trustees of the library, and I'm also a St. Helena citizen, and I'm going to speak to you in both roles at different times here. First of all, just as a citizen, as you're thinking about these different options, I hope you will consider the idea that an awful lot of our residents and our library users are senior citizens and have trouble with stairs. So if most of the activities could take place on the first floor, if this is a two-story thing, it might actually be make it more accessible. Just my thought, though. But I also want to report, as the board chair, that the board is currently working on understanding trends in libraries across the country. So we have a whole lot of information now. We're going to meet tomorrow and talk about this stuff. We're also reviewing floor plans for other new libraries across the country. And we are trying to identify exactly how our library is being used now and what we expect and desire for future uses. And we will get back to you with our report on that as soon as we have sort of consolidated our thoughts. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. Additional public comment?
Hi, Jack Stewart, 22 Crane Avenue. I was on the steering committee last year that, among other things, approved the consultant, the Nolan Tam firm, and it's nice to see you here again. Thank you for the report. I was chair of the Friends and Foundation for the St. Public Library last year. I'm still on the board, but I'm not the chair, and I'm speaking for myself tonight. Just to say, give you my 2 cents. I really like the number 7 design because it consolidates it with a brand new building for both institutions, and it has all of the possibilities for synergies and so forth. My concern about it is it seems to be packed at the very top of the northwest rather boundary with minimum setbacks, and I miss the campus feeling of the way too expensive early plans. But I think that it would be nice to use the 1.3 or 1.5 acre parcel that was drawn in some of the early designs and have more of that campus look, and not to enlarge the building, but to have more of that sort of park-like feeling around it. To have the first thing that people see when they turn onto Library Lane is a parking lot. I think it would be nice to have other features that could be added to it, and it wouldn't be made as expensive as some of the early ones. And I would say as a as an individual, I think the existing library needs to be raised and rebuilt. I think if we did a facelift for the old library, which is now 41 years old, in 2 or 3 years we'd think, oh my God, what did we do? So I think to do something all new, something perhaps a little smaller than we were dreaming a year ago about, but with still wonderful design that has been worked on with great patience, I think, by Nolan Tam. And I'd like you to consider that as a way to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for speaking.
Thank you.
Is there additional public comment? Seeing none, I will close the public comment and bring it back to the council. Any comments from or questions, thoughts from the council?
Just that I was glad to see that there's an option where we get a new library and new city hall that was so much less money. I too like, if I were to pick my preference, I like 7 because I like the idea of having something, a new building for the library, that's something to set up for the future. The question for me is, can we afford it? And that's why we have a committee now coming back with the numbers. So yes, I like 7, and I'm still having that question of how are we going to pay for it. So I like the idea of also having Plan B in my mind, which is this, definitely refresh the library if we can't afford all new, and have the standalone building. When I look at this plan with the standalone right there, I'm not convinced that it needs to be on that site as a standalone. I just don't see the benefit with the campus like what we saw before, and knowing that that land is so valuable. But I'm still leaning towards my number 1 being option 7.
Any other comment, questions, thoughts?
My preference at this point is also to narrow our focus and try to pick one of these options and develop it. There are certainly some good comments that Jack just made. I agree. I think we did direct you to try to reduce the mass, and everything got moved on to the current library parcel, but I don't think that that's entirely necessary, and I think we will get a lot more usable and interesting open space if we have the freedom to not try to just fit into that current site. I also feel that when you go back and you look at our criteria of what were we going to use to decide where we were going with this, to me, option 7 ticks off most of the boxes in the criteria. It does allow for gathering spaces, for community meetings, for multiple uses. The consolidated building really is more efficient, and I think we will make more use of less space than we actually might have with the campus, 3 separate buildings. There's a big desire that came through from the Nolan Tam survey for outdoor space, what people were calling a community living room. And that's where I feel that if we would move forward with 7 and develop it a little bit more, it might not be so rigid, and there might be more bump outs and more of that community kind of feeling. To me, to be able to, even at $38.7 million, it's a vast improvement over 54. I think there is a way to attain it, and we will, I'm sure, hear from our task force about it. But it also, I think it would be a tragedy to at this juncture, to take the big step to build a new city hall and just leave the library with whatever you called it, a refresh. Yeah, I think we would regret that in the future, and I think it would also inhibit how we can really design the new city hall if it happens to be sitting next to it. And I think we have to think about the future, which was actually one of the other criteria of the SHAPE committee, and anticipate future needs. And this is our time to do something more sustainable. I can't imagine letting that library building sit there with whatever its operating costs currently are, and for the next 20 or 30 years until another council decides to do something about it. I have to think there's going to be some built-in cost savings. And just the whole feeling when you showed that sort of perspective view on the second floor and the openness and the light that you're going to get from a more sustainable design, I think it would be something that the community would really feel pride in and enjoy, which frankly was another one of our criteria. So my preference at this point is to focus on option 7.
Mr. Knudsen, Mr. Doring?
My preference is option 7 for the reasons stated. I do think we tend to maybe put too much in the area. Maybe it's a little tight there. Visually, it's like, whoa, it's all there. But option 7 makes sense to me from a financial and aesthetic point of view. And I agree with the points that Mary's made with respect to the problem with the refresh is that we're going to just continue to have problems with that building. And we can take advantage of a time right now where we can make the entire building more sustainable and look more to the future. So I hesitate to just leave a quote refresh. I am concerned about the visual of the parking on we can maybe adjust that. That's not the first thing I want to look at when I turn that corner. But I think Mary has articulated very well. She's a land planner, and I was listening to her, and she's able to articulate her thoughts much more than I can. But I tend to agree with her opinions and Anna's and Jack Stewart. So that's where I am.
Mr. Knudsen, any thoughts?
I think you definitely moved the ball forward, so I appreciate it from Nolan Tam. I think we have an opportunity, if we're going to spend this kind of money, which I think it's a lot, I really do. That's a lot of money, $40 million for a community of 6,000 folks. It's really a lot of money. But if we do elect to do that, I think we have to go to design competition. I mean, we're not professionals, right? We're some folks with ideas. These guys are professionals. I'd like to see more architectural ideas about, parking lot entry.
I would just add I'm a professional, but not in this area.
Yeah. We're not design professionals, is what I'm saying. And I'm personally someone who loves great architecture, and I visit cities and towns to look at great architecture, and there's great architecture in Napa Valley. And we could add to that. And there's no reason, given the beauty of the site and the fascinating and interesting community that we live in, that we couldn't get a world-class building created. And we would attract interest from wide and far that would be fascinating to see what their solutions to these sort of problems are. At any rate, those are my thoughts right now.
Thank you. So I appreciate this work. I think we're really honing in on the options. To me, the next step of the task force coming forward with their findings is going to inform our decision making. So I am at the point of continuing to look at these options and then wanting the information from the task force to help hone that. So that's where I am.
I think it's helpful if we land on something that will help the task force understand where we're going. We didn't appoint them to make the site selection and whatever decision. That's our decision. And they may come back and say this is, beyond what you can handle. They may have ideas about design competition or exactly how we're going to, handle the construction of this building. But every month that we sit here and delay, we are adding $150,000 or $200,000 to the cost of this project. And I think it's high time for us to give some direction, get them some more information so that we can actually bring something to fruition.
So in looking at option 4, I think perhaps we all agree that that's a price tag that may be out of our range. And so that leaves us looking at these 3. Option 6 and option 7 are less. The difference is the sort of the 2-story combined building, or that's option 7. Option 6 is the sort of campus approach. Option 5 is the refresh on the library with the addition of a new city hall at the most reasonable cost. And then it does go to sort of design difference on option 6 or option 7, whether it's the 2-story or the campus look. To me, if we want to eliminate something, we could look at saying option 4 may be out of our range, and we could move away from that. But I think we would, in my opinion, would want a little more discussion on whether option 5, 6, or 7 fits the, and maybe a little more community thought on whether the 2-story or the campus approach.
We're going to make a decision this spring. There's no doubt in my mind. I'm not worried about that at all. I think we are going to hear from the library. I'm excited to hear that they're doing some programmatic thought about that, because they know more than we do, and I think that's fantastic. I'm looking forward to the task force and their recommendation and their thoughts. I don't think we need to give further direction right now, is my belief. And in my mind, the one number that I keep coming down to is, if we have a town of 6,000 people, if we spend $38 million on a building, I think we have to be very careful about that, not knowing that costs increase. But that's $6,000 a resident. So it's a big investment that we're making on behalf of all of us. And so I think we just have to be cautious until we get the results from our folks. 6,333. That's a lot of money. So as we think about this, I think that's, I appreciate the work. I think it helps to clarify what we're actually up for and what the citizens will eventually rally behind. I don't think we have to make a decision today narrowing the field, so to speak. That's my belief.
In terms of narrowing, can we concur that option 4 is perhaps not an option, and at least eliminate that as a...
I think we should eliminate 3 of them. I'd like to speak to the issue of the library and the refresh and the remodel. When we started this process a long time ago, I felt that the library was a very important part of it, because it is really probably the most community used part of the whole scheme. And in my view, if we're going to spend money and it's going to be in this range, we should get a really fantastic community facility out of it, which would be the new library. And the city hall will be there, and it'll be part of it. But I would not want the library to just get this little refresh. I think we would just miss a huge opportunity for something that the community would value, and frankly something that would be a statement for the city. And I just don't agree that we keep pushing this down the road. I think it's time that we make a decision. We look at these issues like the site planning, what are we doing with the parking. We figure out how we're actually going to proceed with the design and make a decision.
I think, in my opinion, what the task force, the financial task force brings us back will inform that decision, and that's the information that I believe we're waiting for. I think we're very close. I think that we're close, and we will be making a decision, but that will inform it as to what level we can go. That's where I am, and I thought that was sort of where we were going, is waiting for this information back from the findings and the analysis of the task force to cross-reference with the plan, the possible building plans.
Yeah, I'm comfortable saying that 7 is my preferred option, but not eliminating all other options tonight.
If we concur that we eliminate option 4, does that at least narrow the field a bit?
Yeah,
Yes, 4 is out.
Okay.
You know, I think we pick an option and we develop it. If we don't pick something and develop it, we're not going to know if it's feasible or not. And we can't keep all options open forever, or we won't get to the point where we can actually fish or cut bait here. And I agree, maybe we will find that it is too expensive and then we have to back off. But that's the point, to back off. And we can always come back and reconsider the decision.
So I would like to rely on Nolan Tam to actually tell us if that would be okay. I'd be very curious in terms of developing ideas further, and if this idea of a design competition were to take root. I'm not sure. I mean, can we do further development at this point, or is this? I mean, you've laid out a programmatic approach, right? I mean, at some point, if we were to do a design competition, we have to have a set of criteria that we take to the architectural community. Do you have any thoughts, Ms. Tam?
This is a master plan. I think if we were to take into consideration some of the comments today, what we might go back and do, but is really maybe it's the site development, is the comment about how the building needs to feel, or the site planning needs to feel better. I don't know if it. I think you may have enough information now to eliminate some, depending on. I don't know, the cost, aside from the cost and whether you can raise the money. I think there are probably a variation of ways to raise money, and I think you have a very creative committee. So I think for me, obviously cost is a big issue and important to every project, but I think it's coming back again. I actually agree with Mary about what's going to create energy in your own community, what is going to live on and really be special, and people will be really proud of it. We do renovation as well as we do new buildings. I think that given some of the other constraints of the site, having option 7, if raising the money were no issue, it gives you more control over the planning of your building. As far as the design competition goes, it's a hard question to answer, really. I mean, in a way, you're bringing people in who don't necessarily know you. They're looking at it from a design point of view purely, as opposed to knowing your community in a little more depth. We've gone through a lot of process, community engagement. We've heard a lot of people. You know, you could open up to a design competition and probably get some amazing things. Whether they're going to be budget conscious, I don't know. Most likely that with competitions, usually it's like a free sort of idea, and whether that's going to help you move forward, I don't know. I think it's, speaking from the design community, it's like, I think it's preferable to select a firm and then hire them and then have them do the design that you like. And that way you're not taking advantage of the design community in terms of getting a ton of different. I mean, it takes a long time to do a competition if you're really serious about it. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, that's great. So my question, I guess, to be more specific, is that you've done a great job of laying out different options and sizing and massing and programmatic aspects. Fantastic, wonderful. If we were to take that to the market from a design competition. And by the way, my father-in-law was an architect, my brother-in-law is an architect, my wife's a design person. You know, that's my orientation, even though I'm a business person. Is there further, with the task force information that we'll have about financing options, if we were to do a design competition, is there further work that you guys would need to deliver to set that up in terms of, I mean, you've done some massing, you've done some sizing, you've done some programmatic aspects. That can be defined, right? You take that to the design world. That can be defined, and therefore you don't need to do any more. Sort of you leave it to the lovely design folks out there to decide, oh, well, that's interesting. This is how we'd solve that problem. This is how we'd solve this problem.
Design competitions are all varied. It depends on how many restrictions you want to put on it.
No, I put a lot, actually.
Okay, well then, I mean, when I think of design competition, I think of it being much more open-ended. And you give them a program, you give them the site, you say, here are some parameters, we find these guidelines really important, and then you let people go at it. That, I don't know, maybe my colleagues here have some opinions about that.
That describes it. I mean, you open it up to...
Can you put on microphone?
You can open it up to international firms or local firms or, state firms. There are a lot of parameters that you need to set. Typically in competitions, budget is not really considered in most of the ones that I'm familiar with or participated in. You have a program and a site, but money is not an issue. And that can cause problems for a community like this. You can get a beautiful design, can't build it, and then you've wasted a lot of time.
No, I get it. Interesting. Okay, well, thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah.
Thank you. So my thought is eliminating option 4 and waiting for the findings of the task force to come back, which I believe is in April, and I think we're getting close. So that's sort of where I am.
Wow. I think we should move forward with option 7. There are so many advantages of a totally new building. And this is not to say that we are wed to this particular floor plan. With input from the library board and the staff about